Let's take a little tour around the Pfaff Ambition 1.0 sewing machine and get you familiar with the different buttons, the screen functions, and how to pick your stitches. So when you turn it on, it immediately goes to a straight stitch. And right here it actually shows us the stitch that it's going to do. Now, it doesn't look like much because it's just a line, but for example, if I pick stitch number 4, in this area, it will give us a picture of the stitch and a definition of the stitch. So there's easy ways to pick stitches. Number 1, just by picking by their number. So if you need a big number like 104, just go ahead and type in all 3 numbers and that stitch will come up on screen. It will tell you what width and what length the stitch will be. Another way to actually pick stitches is actually, see this little arrow pointing down? That indicates that if I touch anywhere on the wheel here and touch the arrow down, this is another way to kind of scroll through different stitches. I can get to some of the art stitches or the ornamental stitches. And as I go up or down, I can go through all the stitches. When I see one I want, I can touch the check mark in the middle and it will pick up that stitch. To get back to a straight stitch, just touch number 1, give it a second, and it will switch back to that straight stitch and at the default settings. So the default setting of a straight stitch is center needle position at 0.0 and a stitch length of 2.5. So your different adjustments for those settings would be over here. And as you change them, notice that the white numbers kind of turn into a highlighted white box. So at a glance, I can see, for example, when I'm teaching classes, if my students have actually made changes to a stitch and not gotten back to the default setting. By reselecting that same stitch, I just touch number 1, it will clear everything out with just one touch of a button, which I really like. If you go to another stitch and come back to stitch 1, that also would clear out the settings if you didn't know where the normal setting was. In this area, you would have actually needle position if I used this feature. So you can see that line is moving further up on the screen and my needle is actually moving to the right. And if I go ahead and go the opposite direction, my needle moves all the way to the left side. Once again, I'm going to just touch number 1 and that will reset that particular stitch. Down below here, we have other features. All I need to do is kind of arrow down. Down below, we have other features or little tabs. So if I use the arrow pointing to the right, the little tabs will change as highlighted areas. So the first one is for selecting stitches. The second one is for the tie-off features. The next one is for the alphabet and being able to program your own quote labels or monogramming, anything you want to do there. The next one is really unique. This eye will tell me what the stitch I've chosen actually is used for. So the straight stitch I'm on for seaming and top stitching. So if I pick a different stitch, it would have a different little definition. It's like having your own little manual right there on your screen. The last little tab is kind of a settings tab where we can turn on like the twin needle, the stitch with safety if I choose to put a throat plate on with just a single hole. The contrast of the screen, the language, and your serial number is actually in there too. So if you arrow to the left or to the right, that's how we can move around that area. You'll notice on the screen is also a recommendation for what foot you should be using, whether the that's the IDT, whether the IDT is engaged or not. And this is a recommended tension. So the tension dial is actually up here. So you will change your own tension. So if those numbers change to a range of 2 to 4, then we would want to bring that dial down. Now it doesn't change on screen, you just physically turn it. And then when you're done, just kind of turn it back to whatever the next stitch tells you it should be at. Over here we have the feature for the needle up and down. So your needle up down feature means that if you have that on and the light is lit, that now when you sew, the needle is going to stop in the down position. A quick touch of that same button will bring your needle up. So you'll rarely see me coming over here and turning the hand wheel. I can do it with my button, but I can also do it with my foot control. With a quick tap of my toe, I can take a half a stitch. Half a stitch again if I touch it quickly at the top. And I love that feature. Okay, so whichever you need it to be at, needle stopping down or needle in the up position. You have a pattern begin. So if you're sewing along, or a pattern restart is the way the manual says. So if you're sewing along and you get halfway through a decorative stitch and you want to start back at the beginning of that stitch, this touch will bring it back and restart it. Next is the tie-off feature. We'll go into that with some extra details, but pretty much it's a locking stitch. So you can have those secure stitches at the beginning and end that's not just sewing in reverse and stitching over itself. Your speed control, so you can slow your machine down to a very slow speed. That's as fast as it's going when it's all the way at the reduced speed. We also have the ability to sew without the foot control. So once again, I'm going to go a little slower just so it doesn't race off. And when I touch this button, it's actually sewing without me touching the foot control. And when I push it, again, it stops. Your reverse, so your reverse button will work in two ways depending on when you touch it, but it will pretty much sew backwards and lock your stitches into place. Back over here, we do have a mirror image, so you can make a stitch flip over left to right and also from front to back. These buttons here are in conjunction with your memory. So when we go into here and we touch it, oh, I was playing around with here. Clear, actually, will clear out each of the stitches that you've put in and allow you to put in lettering or stitches or a combination of both. To get back out of that, just go ahead and touch the program area and it will close back out and go back to your regular stitch. Up here at the top, this is pressure foot adjustment. So just if you need the foot to be raised or lowered a little bit heavier or looser, that is the dial that does it there. I think for right now, this is a good overview, and join us as we go into more detail of every part of this machine, including all the accessories, as we continue on at sewingmastery.com.